Hi there, I'm Amanda Castor with Material Girl Quilts, and this is week 5 and our final week of the Snowfall Sew Along. If you're just now joining us, what we're doing is making the snowfall quilt behind me. And if you'd like more information, all of the links to the prior weeks are in the video description below, as well as information to purchase the snowfall quilt pattern. So last week we worked on finishing up our snowflake blocks. And now that they're all done, what we're going to do is square them all up. So these are a very large block, as you know. So I find it best when squaring this up is to set it out on my large cutting mat. And if I line it up along the 0 line on the left hand side, then make sure that your lines are in your snowflake are straight, then what you'll need to do is go along all 4 sides of your blocks and make sure that you can trim it up if necessary. If you have maybe one end that has a little bit extra on it, but you need to make sure that you leave at least 1/4 of an inch beyond the tips of your diamonds for the snowflakes. So I'm going to line it up here on the left hand side at 0, and then I will measure and make sure that I leave at least 1/4 of an inch beyond the tips of my diamonds, and then I'm going to trim. And now another good thing to do is to make sure that you're trimming the sides straight, because this ruler here is 24 inches. My block is bigger than this 24-inch ruler, and you may not have a ruler this long, but if you line it up at the 0 line here on the bottom, your ruler up on the bottom of the 0 line on the mat, then you'll make sure that your line is straight going up. So I'm going to do that now, and again, make sure that I leave 1/4 of an inch at least, and just trim off the excess from that side. Now you can see that on the ends I maybe had a little bit more fabric than the middle section. And you'll just keep doing that for all 4 sides of your block. So you'll rotate, and actually I'm just going to do the opposite side so I can make sure that this is perfectly straight on the 0 line, and see if I need to trim any here. And I do have a little bit to trim up at the top. Okay. There we go. So really only my top and this bottom section needed trimming. And again, you just repeat this process for all 4 sides of each of your blocks. And then once your blocks are trimmed or squared up, that's the measurement that you'll need for your sashing. And if you're doing the entire quilt, I would suggest that you lay out your blocks first and see if there's one that's, make sure they're all basically the same size before you start trimming. Maybe if there's one that's a lot larger or smaller than the other, you need to make sure that you, like I said, don't trim off the points of your diamonds. So you'll need to work with that measurement to make sure that they're all the same. So once you have trimmed your block up, like I said, you're going to determine how big your block is. And so it should be somewhere between 24 and 25 inches square. Now, I know typically in a normal quilt pattern, it's exactly like 12.5 inches or 24.5 inches. But given the fact that there are so many biased edges in this block and everyone's seam allowance can be slightly off, I just suggest that you wait until your blocks are squared up before you determine your block size to cut your sashing pieces. So for the sashing, after all of your blocks are squared up, what you're going to need to do is, if you're just making the 1 block quilt like our red and white version here, you will only need to make 4 sets of sashing. But if you're making the full quilt, you'll need to make 12. So for each sashing set, what you're going to need are 2 background strips that's 1.5 inches by the size of your block. 2 of the, for me it's this teal color, which is the accent color on the snowflakes. So 2 of those at 1.5 inches by the size of your block, and then 1 of your main snowflake fabric. So for me that's blue. And then you will lay those out as I've done here, where the background fabric is on the outside, and then the 2 teal, and then the very center is the blue fabric for me. And so once you piece these together, you will press towards these second and fourth strips. So for me, we pressed in towards the teal strips. And again, you will make a total of 4 sashing sets for the 1 block quilt, or 12 if you're doing the full size quilt. And now what we need to do is work on the cornerstones. So as you can see for the full size quilt, there's all of the outside cornerstones are one type of block, and then this center cornerstone is different. So you'll have to follow the pattern instructions for that cornerstone block, because I'm only doing the 1 block quilt here today. So what I'm going to show you is all of the rest of the cornerstone blocks. Okay, to make our cornerstones, we're going to need to create 3 different strip sets. So the first strip set will have your accent snowflake fabric on the outside, your main snowflake fabric, and the 2 middle ones, and then the very center is your background fabric. And when we press those, it will be pressed out towards the teal for me, and then towards the center. So you'll press out towards the outside and then towards the center for that set. Now the second strip set, you will, and also for these, if you're making the full size quilt, you will need to make 2 of these to subcut later. And then if you're just making the 1 block quilt, you can just make 1. So for the second strip set, you will take 3 different strips of your main snowflake fabric and 2 of the accent snowflake fabric, and alternate them with the main on the outside and then in the center. And when you press them, you will press towards the second and fourth row again. So this is towards the accent snowflake fabric. For me, it's the teal. Again, you'll make 2 sets of these if you're making the full size quilt, or just 1 if you're doing the 1 block quilt. And the last strip set we need to create is using 2 background strips, 2 of your main snowflake fabric strips, and 1 of your accent snowflake fabric strips. And these, again, you will press out towards the outside, so towards the background, and then also towards the center strip, which is the accent and teal color for me. Now this strip set, you will only need to create 1 of these regardless of which block that you're, which quilt that you're piecing. So now that we have these strip sets complete, what we need to do is subcut these into 1.5 inch sets. So we're going to start by, if the edge of your strip set is not perfectly straight, go ahead and straighten that up. And then we were going to cut in 1.5 inches. You will need a total of 8 units for the 1 block quilt, or 16 if you're making the entire full-size quilt. So again, we just cut this into 1.5 inch, oops, I almost did 1 3/4, 1.5 inch units, and we'll cut a total of 8. For me, I'm just cutting a total of 8 for each one. And then you'll have a little bit left over for scrap. And you repeat the process for your other strip sets. You will cut a total of 16 from this strip set if you're doing the full-size quilt, or 8 again if you're doing the one block quilt. And this strip set here with the background on the outsides, you will only need 4 of these for the one block quilt and 8 for the full-size quilt. Okay, now that we've cut all of our units from the strip sets, we're going to select, for each cornerstone, we will select 2 unit A's, 2 unit B's, and 1 unit C, and you will sew those together to create your cornerstones. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these cornerstones together now, and then we'll be back to finish the quilt. Okay, now that our cornerstones are all pieced, you will notice that if you pressed in the direction that the pattern instructs you to, your seams will nest up, and then as you sew your units together and press those seams open like I did here, then your cornerstone will lay nice and flat. So now we need to assemble the quilt top. And again, if you're doing the full-size quilt top, you still have 1 more cornerstone to create, and all the instructions for that this center cornerstone are in the pattern, and it's made by cutting and then piecing together 1.5 inch squares. So when we're sewing this quilt top together, we're going to start by assembling the sashing rows. So for the one block quilt, it will be a cornerstone, a sashing strip, and then another cornerstone. For the full-size quilt, you will have the same thing plus an additional sashing strip and 1 more cornerstone. So for the one block quilt, you'll have 2 sashing rows, and for the full size, you will have 3 sashing rows. And then what you'll need to do is piece together the block rows. So for, again, the one block quilt, it will be a sashing strip, your quilt block, and then sashing strip. And for the full size, you can see what you need to do for that one as well. So once you get all of your rows together, your sashing rows and then your block rows, then you just sew the rows together to complete your quilt top. And then it's time to take a step back and admire the beauty of the snowfall quilt that you just finished. Now, as we discussed last week, there was a giveaway. So as your homework was to work on completing your blocks, here's the winner from last week's giveaway. So obviously your homework for this week is finishing up your quilt top. And the giveaway this week is a fat quarter bundle of Winterland, my latest collection with Riley Blake Designs. Now, I'm going to give you more than a week to get your quilt top finished, so if you submit either via email or tag me on social media at Material Girl Quilts and use the hashtag Snowfall SAL, then you have until September 30th to get your quilt top completed. So this will help those of you that are playing catch up or that you just joined us, and you can get your quilt top done, show photos, and enter to win the giveaway to win this fat quarter bundle. I really appreciate all of you sewing along with me. This has been a lot of fun, and if you have ideas for other sew-alongs that you'd like to do or other videos you'd like to see me make, please leave them in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.